Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Brenda's Musings. So earlier today, I was looking out the window, and part of the backyard was in sunshine, and part of the backyard was in like rain clouds forming, and it's still a little bit like that now. Like the sun just came out again, and the front yard is like all clouds, and so I started thinking about change and how I react to change, and it goes back to sort of how I react to everything. There's a scale, worst case scenario, best case scenario. It's not going to be either one of those. It's going to be somewhere up here, somewhere in the best case scenario. Usually the top third. It pretty much lands there without fail most of the time. But when it does land in the bottom third, it's like, okay, I've got to be with it. I've got to figure out, what's true in the whole scenario. I'm making up my mind, because our minds are super powerful, right? Our minds can make things that are not real. I think one of the first times I recognized this was when I was probably 8 or 9. I didn't want to go to school because I wanted to finish a book I was reading. And the only way we couldn't go to school is if we had a fever. So my mom put the thermometer under my tongue and went to help my brother get ready for school or whatever. And I took the thermometer out from under my tongue and I put it under my arm, and I held my arm really close like this, figuring that the temperature was going to go up between it being squeezed in between my arm and my body. Anyway, just before I thought she would come back in, I put it back under my tongue. And when she came back in and read it, sure enough, it was a little bit higher. Now, I know the difference in that now, but, it wasn't a lot higher. It was a little bit higher. So I got to stay home and read my book. And as I was reading my book, I started, everything was fine. I felt great. I was like, yay, scored one over on Mom. And then I started thinking about, I think I've got a bit of a headache. Oh, my throat feels scratchy. And within an hour, I had myself totally convinced that I, had a really bad cold. And again, I know the difference of that too. And so the longer the day went on, the worse I felt, until I put my book aside. It was almost done, but I put my book aside and I just napped because I just felt so horrible. When my brother came home from school, after, a few minutes of excitement and all that kind of stuff, whatever, then he and I started, having fun. And then before I knew it, I felt perfectly fine. I hadn't thought about being sick ever since. And so it just, it talks about the properties of your mind and how we can draw attention to things and make things real that are not real. And that can happen in any aspect of our life. And, there are fantastic stories out there about people who have healed themselves with their mind, people who have died of heartache because of, how their mind and their heart felt. And I believe that any of these things are possible. So when I look at change, I think of two things. I think of, some changes in my life have been not even a blip on the screen, little minor things. Other things have been, major things. Like when I moved back to Newfoundland, for example, that was a major life change for me. And it changed the trajectory of my life, right? Getting married changes your life. Having kids changes your life. These are all big things. What I chose to have for breakfast this morning, probably not that big of a thing. And even if I chose something and I had a bad reaction to it, again, in the history of 61 years that I've lived so far, not a big thing. So, putting things into context for me is one way that I can easily deal with change. Looking at the truth of what is actually in front of me, the hardcore facts, not what I believe to be true, is another surefire way for me to, assess change and sort of figure out what's, what it's all about and what it's actually to mean in my life. And yeah, so all of those thoughts came to me while looking up at the sky from the window. That's my musing. Have a great one, everyone.